Welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting for June 2nd, 2025, to be called to order at 6 p.m. May I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor, and that carries unanimously. My apologies, I'm getting information fed to me that I'm not able to process at the same time. Councillor Martin, I will turn it over to you for our land acknowledgement, please.
We've gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We do have some additions to the agenda this evening, and that includes a specific interest delegation. There is also the report on the proposed fireworks bylaw changes, and the report on the regional road assumption were added. So the recommendation is that we adopt the agenda as amended for June 2nd, 2025. May I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Stu, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? And that carries. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest, councillors? Councillor Martin?
Yes, I did fill out a form, although I did it late in the day, so whether the clerks have received it or okay, you have received it, and that's for, now I don't even know the numbers, sorry, 10.7 on the funding, and I'm prevention coordinator for the Firebirds, and so I would remove myself from any discussion regarding the New Hamburg Firebirds.
Very good, and when we do get to that point in the agenda, we'll just remove that one so you can still discuss all of the other grants up for topic tonight. In terms of presentations this evening, we do have a presentation from our communications specialist, Brett O'Reilly, and Brett's going to be giving us an update on the 2025 Citizen of the Year program, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. Good evening, Mayor Salonen, members of council. I'm here to give you a brief presentation on the Citizen of the Year program. I would like to acknowledge my colleague Jennifer Buzane, who has been leading this project and has done a tremendous amount of work to get everything ready. So to tell you a little bit about the program, it's an annual initiative that celebrates individuals, sorry, next slide, Morgan, who have contributed to the quality of life here in Wilmot. It's an opportunity for us to publicly acknowledge those in our community who make it a better place. Next slide. So to give you a timeline of the program will launch next Monday, June 9th, with the opening of the nomination period. So residents will have 2 weeks to nominate individuals in the community that deserve recognition. After that period, the nominees will be reviewed to ensure they meet all the criteria. And then from June 30th to July 11th, people will have the opportunity to vote for all eligible nominees. The votes will be tallied in review, and the individuals with the most votes in each category will be named the winner. The winners will be announced on August 8th, and awards will be presented at a ceremony at the New Hamburg Fall Fair in September. So the public will be notified at each stage in the process through our local media, our website, our Engage Wilmot platform, and social media. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there are multiple categories, 5 categories: athletics, community service, culture, seniors, and youth. Each of the 5 categories do have specific eligibility requirements, but in all cases, both the nominator and the nominee must be a Wilmot resident and must not be a member of council, staff, or immediate family members of either group. Next slide. For nomination and voting forms, they will be available through our Engage Wilmot platform. All the voting forms and criteria will be there, and any information about the program that people might need. Those who prefer a hard copy of the form can also come here to the building to get a form. They can drop it off when it is completed. All of the other rules and regulations, as I said, will be on the Engage project page. So as mentioned, the award winners will be notified on July 21st and will be announced to the public in August, and then there'll be a public ceremony at the New Hamburg Fall Fair in September, and we'll provide more details about that as we go through the process. Next slide. There will also be an opportunity for people to provide feedback on the program. We want to improve it each year and make sure that it's beneficial to the public. So we will be having a survey opportunity through the Engage platform in September. So all the information, as I said, will be on that platform at wilmot.ca/citizen of the year. And any questions that staff or residents have can be sent to citizenoftheyear@wilmot.ca. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Brett. I'm not seeing any questions other than Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, just to say thank you for working on this. Having been a previous member of this committee, I think it's a great program, and I hope we can continue it because it's nice to recognize people positively.
Absolutely. I don't have any questions other than just encouraging the public to sign up. So thank you again for bringing this forward to council. We appreciate it. This evening, we do have one specific interest delegation who's registered for Committee of the Whole. Each speaker will have 7 minutes to address council, and I will call upon them when it's their turn to speak. Just as a reminder, once we do get to that item for the delegate, that there are some guidelines for participation. If they are joining us online, which I believe they are tonight, if you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in immediate removal from the meeting, and this includes interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and hate speech or defamatory comments. And we don't actually have a gallery with us tonight, so I will skip over the general gallery conduct. And the delegate will speak once we get to item 10.2, which they've registered to correspond on. We do have one item of correspondence which was circulated to council in advance. Did anybody want to pull that item? Okay, seeing none. We do have multiple items on our consent agenda. Before we vote on them, would anybody like to remove any particular items? Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I would like to pull 9.4. Consultant services for Wilmot Fire Station 3 design, etc., etc.
You may speak to that now.
Yes, in reading through this, I was getting mixed messages because the title would appear that the fire station design is being contracted. And the more I read, it would appear it was just the facility that was the former Alpine. And so I just found either the title a little misleading. I just wanted to make sure we weren't moving forward with design of the fire hall itself. And the second question was, are there going to be offices, long-term offices in the former Alpine building for the fire officials, or are they considered temporary?
I will look over to Director Catania.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Cressman. So this RFP for the award is trying to knock off two things at once here. We have previous capital budget approval for an architect for the fire hall, as well as funding that would be for some fit up with the 30 Neville property. So the architect an RFP was put out by staff, and we were looking at just awarding to phase 1, which would be schematic design for both projects. So that's at 30 Neville for some parks, offices, and interior spaces such as change rooms, washrooms, that type of thing that we don't really have for the staff. And then as well, awarding for a schematic design to take a look at feasibility on the site as well to actually have a Fire Hall Station 3, which would replace the New Hamburg Fire Hall that's in downtown New Hamburg.
Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yes, thank you, and I apologize for that interruption.
That's okay. Any other questions on this item, councillors? Okay, seeing none. Any other items that people want to pull from consent? Councillor Wilkinson?
Yes, through the chair, I'd like to pull item 9.5 regarding the grant application for the Petersburg water system.
You may speak to that now.
Thank you. So reading through it at first, it looks quite promising, and obviously would be welcomed by the community there that is facing this this water upgrade. My question is actually to Director Clark in regards to, I was curious if the funding potentially is still available, if, say, for instance, there's no appetite amongst the community to expand the system, or even if that's possible, we don't know, depending on what the EA may come back from the region, but also, say, looking at the urbanization piece for the community. If there's not a huge appetite for that, is it possible that we can still expect maybe the same level of funding if it's just the initial project that was proposed from the get-go?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. So the way that the grant's set up is that they provide 73% of eligible costs. So if what we got approved was the 62 residents and the upgrade of their system, then it would be 73% of that. So if we, applied for the bigger amount and we got approved for all of that and there was different decisions made about the urbanization, stormwater, expanding the system, then that would be something we'd have to bring back to council to discuss at that time, whether, we'd have to renegotiate with the ministry about grant funding, but it's 73% of eligible costs, and so they're going to be very adamant about what the outcomes are and what the deliverables are when they approve that funding. So it's going to be tied to the actual work. So if something in that scope of work changes, then we have to renegotiate the transfer payment agreement.
And through the chair, as a follow-up, in your experience, if you apply for it as structured and something should change down the road, what would an expected outcome be? Do you expect that it could dry up, or do you expect that it will still be there but will just require that extra legwork in terms of negotiation?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. It's always difficult when going into these application-based grant programs because you're putting forward a scope of work and a budget, and that's what they're approving. So any change is a negotiation that can be, involve a bit of work to explain the rationale. I would suggest that if we were to reduce the scope of work, that's probably an easier negotiation than if we were to go back and ask for additional funding after the fact is typically not even on the table. So my sense is that if we asked for it and got it, and then something changed in the delivery of those services or the scope of the project, that de-scoping a portion of the project would be more palatable to the province than after the fact asking for additional funding.
Through the chair, thank you. One final follow-up. In terms of timeline right now, I'm curious, and I may have missed it, but just for public's sake, when is the deadline on this grant application, and when can we potentially expect a response back?
Through you, Mayor, I can respond to that question. So the application is due at the end of June. In terms of actually hearing back from the ministry, it's unknown at this point, and typically with these types of application-based, we're sort of at the mercy of the ministry, so I don't think we can give you a timeline as to when we expect to hear back. I'd be hopeful that we'd hear back obviously this year so that we can plan for future budget years, but no real answer on that.
We will do Councillor Cressman, and then we will go back to Councillor Robinson for follow-up.
Through you, Mayor, I'm not sure I have to kind of ask questions in rhyme when funding will dry up like water or when we're down the road further. But my question basically is looking at the profile of the road. Who makes that decision? Is it the residents that are impacted, or is it this council? Because the profile was in the, if we're going to get this grant, then I think that it was being suggested that we use an updated city profile as compared to the open ditch that is there.
Through you, Mayor, so a couple things. As we had agreed to in terms of process. We expect to deal with more public consultation and come back to this council with an outline of the public process and recommendations following that. In terms of the profile, I wouldn't suggest it's a city profile or an urban profile. It'd be more of a semi-urban, if you will, not necessarily a barrier curb or something like that. That's what we were sort of considering in terms of the road cross-section, but all of that is yet to be determined, and again, we'll come back to this council for the decision, as a result of obviously a staff recommendation. So yes, that will return to this council at some point. I think we're in a bit of an odd spot here in terms of, and this is very common with these types of applications, where we do have to have a public and engagement process with any sort of project like this, and so sometimes things do change when you go to public engagement and public process. And so when we're dealing with the ministry in terms of the application, we're going to do our best to make all of the scope relevant that we think will or could possibly be part of the job. And then if something does change down the road in terms of de-scoping, then as Director Clark has mentioned, it would be much easier to do that than to certainly go back and ask for more scope or more coverage. We've had a few applications in my time here that we have had some scope changes and de-scoped, and usually it is a reasonable discussion and process, and it's nothing that's too onerous in terms of a negotiation or in terms of conversation. It's, if it is warranted and you have good rationale for it, then typically the funding partners are agreeable.
Back to Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I want to thank my colleague, Councillor Cressman, here for asking that question and then also the response. But in general, thank you to the staff for preparing this. I know the citizens certainly will appreciate any sort of relief that is potentially offered to them regarding this project. My final question on this, and then I think we can move forward, is should this grant come through, and even at, as you've described, the maximum scope, is there enough time to get this constructed should it be approved and move forward?
Through you, Mayor, the timelines are tight, but that being said, in terms of setting ourselves up for contracted services and multi-year contracts, I think what we've assessed internally is it is doable. It just means that we may have to ramp up pretty quickly and have a pretty significant workforce, whoever we do, if we are successful in terms of the contractor selection, then we would have to have a contractor who can meet the timelines, and so that would be part of whatever contract we let. It may affect the price and it may affect other elements of the project, but that's something we can determine down the road. We do feel like it is something that can be done within the timelines.
Any other questions, councillors, on this report? Okay, seeing none. Any other consent agenda items that people have questions on? Seeing none, I would look for a mover and a seconder then for consent agenda items 9.1 through to 9.5. Please moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to our reports for this evening. Our first one is the recommendation that report COR-2025-18-2026 municipal election alternative voting methods be received for information, and that council adopts option number, which we will choose and insert momentarily, as the voting method for the 2026 municipal and school board election, and further that the municipal clerk be directed to bring forward a bylaw to authorize the alternative voting method supported by council to the next regular council meeting. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. And I will invite our Manager of Legislative Services, Caitlin Boss, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. The report before you provides council with information on voting method options available for the 2026 municipal and school board election, and it will seek a recommendation to support timely planning and preparation. The 2026 election is scheduled for Monday, October 26th, and while council has what seems like a lot of time to decide, selecting a method now will support the required procurement process, procedure development, and a strong public communication plan on the chosen voting method. In the report, there are 3 options outlined. Option 1 being paper ballots with tabulators, which offers a familiar in-person voting experience closely modeled after the provincial election. Option 2 is internet voting, a modern approach which increases accessibility by allowing electors to vote from any smart device anywhere. Option 3 is a hybrid model which combines both methods and was used in the most recent municipal election. Each option is compliant with the Municipal Elections Act and upholds the principles of a fair, accessible, and secure election. Early direction on voting methods in advance of the May 1st, 2026 deadline will ensure that staff have sufficient time to finalize details, secure equipment and services, and educate the public on how to vote. Again, staff believe that each option upholds the guiding principles of the MEA, and we look for Council's recommendation on the method that they believe best serves their electors in upholding a democratic, fair, and accessible election. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Clerk Boss. Councillor Sadhu.
Not so much a question, just kind of an observation. I know online voting was quite popular during the last election. We had, just looking at the numbers here, 65% were online. Being super user-friendly and easy to vote online. I think this is definitely something we should pursue. I'm more in favor of the hybrid system that gives people the opportunity to either do it online or kind of do a paper ballot. The only request I would have compared to the last election is having the ability to vote on election day. I know there was a lot of confusion last time about that, but my preference would be a hybrid system where we don't go totally one way. It kind of gives people a balance of how they would like to vote.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to address the voting in person on election day. So in reviewing the material from the 2022 election, it looked like they failed to secure tabulators. So to ensure that the results were delivered in a timely manner, they didn't have in-person voting on election day. So by giving direction a year in advance, we should be able to secure tabulators and have voting in person on election day.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, as a general observation and then as a question, I mean, I am also in favor of option 3. I will admit I have concerns about online voting just from the perspective of preventing fraud. It's I don't know, questionable in my mind, but you know, I think the system for the most part we've seen work. So I would love to see more information as we maybe approach the election and have information readily available to the general public about the security measures and the way that we ensure that one person is casting one vote, and not so much from the perspective of say going in person and then also casting one online. I realize software can take care of that, but more so from a perspective, say there's one person who takes it upon themselves to cast votes on behalf of all family members in their household. That's where I would see potential concern. However, I'm fairly comfortable with option 3. My question is it possible for any savings at all should we adopt option 3 but not opt to bring in tabulators? Just thinking back to last year, I know it was a hand-counted vote, and I believe it was counted on election day. So if we see maybe similar numbers, could we potentially save money by not bringing in tabulators? Like, what is the potential cost saving there?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Salonen, there would be a cost savings to not using tabulators. My suggestion for that would be that if option 3 is the preferred method, we go out for a joint RFP with the area townships. That final number would come back to council for considerations, and I'd be able to itemize tabulators in that. And at that time, we could make the decision if we were going to proceed with tabulators or not.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I agree that the hybrid system with as the various options that were listed in option 3 is my preferred option as well. And I think anything that ensures that there's less barriers for the public to vote is important. The only thing I know well, I guess this was one of the provincial elections, but to have very clear delineation of advanced polls for the elderly who have difficulty, either mobility or whatever, where the polling booth is. I know of people at Murray's former store on Advanced Poll that they went all over the store trying to find anyhow, it was a challenge. Let's put it that way. So I think a clear path, if it is on a second floor, you have a clear path indicating where the elevator is, et cetera, and that all can work out in the details.
So part of the Municipal Elections Act and the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, we will be ensuring that where possible, that we can have accessible voting locations for our electors.
And I think clear communication as well also got picked up by staff for sure. Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salen, I concur with my colleagues. I also prefer option 3. I realize it is a higher cost, but to me it makes sense to give that. And I think from my point of view, I would have thought that if we only had internet voting, that we would have people not happy with that. But I was curious, I'd asked Clerk Boss before the meeting if it's accurate that and I mean it's there, that some municipalities only use internet voting. Do we know what feedback they've received? Is there much feedback from municipalities that only use internet voting?
Thank you, Councillor Martin, through you, Mayor Salonen. Not off the top of my head. I can do further research, but I can't provide a response to that question.
But thank you, Clerk Boss. Having said that, my preference is to use a hybrid method. I think giving the option is good. Mm-hmm.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, given everyone's commentary on the topic, I'd like to propose that we amend to insert option number 3.
So that's moved by Councillor Wilkinson. Is there seconded by Councillor Cressman? All those in favor of the amendment for option 3? That carries unanimously. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I'd just like to make sure that it's noted that before we agree 100% that we will be seeing at least an RFP and given an option as to whether include or not the tabulating option. That's all.
That'll just be taken as direction, but we do have confirmation from Clerk Boss on that. Seeing no other comments or questions on this, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to report 10.2. The recommendation is that report COR-2025-24 be received for information and that council direct staff to bring back a bylaw to amend bylaw 23-17, being the fireworks bylaw, to the August regular council meeting that includes the following recommendations as included in the report before us, which includes decreasing the number of permitted days for fireworks, adding permitted times to set off fireworks, prohibiting the sale of fireworks within the township, and increasing set fines. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. And I will invite our Supervisor of Municipal Law Enforcement, Aaron Merritt, to introduce this report.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. The report before you is seeking guidance as to what recommendations we should include in updating the Township of Wilmot's fireworks bylaw. A little background, back in 2023, the Township of Wilmot conducted a robust public engagement campaign regarding changes to the noise bylaw. At such time during the campaign, we heard from a lot of residents about fireworks and the noise that is created during them. So because of that, we wanted to review our fireworks bylaw, so that was put on the work plan. In 2024, both the City of Cambridge started to review its fireworks bylaw, as well as the City of Kitchener. Kitchener Council directed staff to reach out to regional partners and explore the possibility of a collaborative regional strategy to improve fireworks safety. During this collaborative approach, information was gathered through a survey on Engage WR. The results of the survey, along with Wilmot residents' responses, were provided in this report. The results from Wilmot residents mirrored what was found region-wide. Also, research was conducted into what other communities are doing regarding fireworks, approaches tried, their experiences, as well. Additionally, we met with Aleem, who will speak after, from the Canadian National Fireworks Association to get the fireworks industry's perspectives. In this report, I have 4 recommendations before you as to possible changes in the fireworks bylaw. The first recommendation is to decrease the number of days that fireworks are allowed to be set off within the Township of Wilmot from 12 days to 5. The second recommendation sets out times when fireworks can be set off. Our current bylaw doesn't set out times, so this recommendation just helps set clear requirements and understandings as to when residents can set off fireworks, and it also helps with enforcement purposes. The third recommendation is to prohibit the sale of fireworks within the Township of Wilmot starting in 2026. Businesses currently are allowed to sell fireworks for 20 days out of the year, and with starting the ban in 2026, it gives retailers time to adjust inventory, things like that. The final recommendation is to increase set fines. Higher fines act as a deterrent to offenders, but this also comes with challenges within the township as outlined in the report. Staff are supportive of these recommendations as I feel they are a way of finding a middle ground so people can still enjoy fireworks, and then the residents who may not enjoy fireworks have more direction as to when they'll be occurring, things like that. But at the end of the day, it's up to the will of council. I look forward to bringing back a fireworks bylaw to for council's consideration in August, incorporating any or all recommendations supported here tonight. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer those.
Thank you very much, Aaron. We will go to Councillor Cressman first for questions.
Through you, Mayor, to Aaron, I guess I see recommendation 1 and recommendation 2 as being fairly doable. I see recommendation 3 as being slightly at odds with the fact that you're going to permit fireworks in the township, and yet you're going to prohibit the sale of fireworks. So I would say that I would be agreeable to recommendation 1 and recommendation 2, but recommendation 3, I think is likely too restrictive in my mind. I'd be interested what my fellow councillors think.
And sorry, I should have clarified, this is the item that we have somebody speaking on as well, so I will save the rest of the debate of our colleagues for that, but this is questions for Aaron, so Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, a question of technical nature then. Looking at recommendation number 2, looking at limiting the timing, I'm just curious, would our existing noise bylaw already govern that, or is this somewhat duplication of work, or do you think it needs to be defined outright?
So in the research that was done in the discussions I had, especially in some of the larger centers, without times, people were setting fireworks off at any time during the day. So some people were setting them off at, say, like 12:30 a.m. and going kind of throughout the night, and it's allowed on that day because we allow it for that day. So my thought was if we had specific times when they were allowed, then to residents that may not be in support of fireworks, know this is the time that they may be hearing them, things like that.
Any other questions for Aaron at this moment? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I appreciate your report, Supervisor Merritt, and I'm not sure then if my comments or questions are better fit here or after the delegation. And the one question I have is just in terms of reporting. So I do like the proposals you're making. The comments or concerns that I hear are people saying they see fireworks set off at times they're not supposed to be set off. So I think the more clear that we can be on the time period and the time frame as well as the fines, I think is good. The question of enforcement is problematic because if it's in the evening and it's a time that you're not working, how do we enforce that? And it's in your report, neighbors are hesitant to later serve as a witness against their neighbors because they want to keep up good neighborly relations. It's tough. I don't know if there are any recommendations for what people can do when they're witness to fireworks at inappropriate times and it affects their neighborhood. So I'm just raising these questions, I guess.
Thank you. Through the mayor. Enforcement of the fireworks bylaw is difficult. My colleagues in the cities have difficulty with it, and their staff is, upwards of 40 officers. So it's definitely difficult for us, and as I outlined in the report, it's tough even if it's myself and 2 part-time members. Even if all 3 of us were on at night, if we get a call and I'm in New Hamburg and the call's in, say, New Dundee, for example, it's a 15-minute drive. The display of fireworks could be over by that time, right? And if, people have cleaned up, it's hard to lay charges. So it's something that everybody is dealing with. We definitely try to use information and informing residents of what's allowed. But it is definitely a tricky situation for us.
Any other questions for Erin at this time? I did just have one question under recommendation number 2 for the timing. I was just curious why the Chinese Lunar New Year is an hour before the other identified times. If you could speak to that.
So again, through the mayor. We had quite a discussion on this because I was perplexed by it too. But my colleagues enlightened me that the Chinese Lunar New Year is normally in the first part of the year. Therefore, it gets darker earlier, so people may want to celebrate earlier. And that's why the time was different, because I just thought if we kept the time the same for everything, it was easier, but it did make sense when that was brought up.
That makes sense. Thank you very much. As I mentioned, we do have one registered delegation for this item, and that is Aline Kanjan, the Chief Advocacy Officer for the Canadian National Fireworks Association, who's joining us virtually this evening. Thank you, Aline, for joining us, and you will have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to make sure everyone can hear and see me before I proceed.
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And good evening to everybody in Wilmot, and my apologies for not being with you in person. I'm actually just getting back from FCM in Ottawa, and unfortunately couldn't be with you in Wilmot today and this evening. So again, my name is Aline Kanji. I serve as the Chief Advocacy Officer for the Canadian National Fireworks Association. We represent a regulated and legally compliant industry operating in communities across Canada, of course, including in Wilmot. And on behalf of our 3,000 members and the many of your Wilmot residents who use, who sell, and who enjoy fireworks, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today on your ongoing deliberations regarding fireworks in your municipality. I want to get to some of the comments that were made, and one of the ones that was made earlier was that the bylaw does seem to be at odds. I want to first of all thank staff for a very insightful report, certainly supportive of adding more prescription around times and time of use. We see that in communities across the country, and I think tightening that up really makes a lot of sense. I also want to applaud staff for suggesting higher fines. Again, for delinquent use, we think that's fantastic, but as staff also indicated to you a few minutes ago, the enforcement of the bylaw is difficult. It's often reactive. And so I think that begs the question on how would a ban be enforced? And really a sales ban doesn't really do much because people will be purchasing online in your community from other communities, or they'll hop over to Guelph or other communities like North Dumfries, who recently rejected a ban a few weeks ago in their council. Let's start with what happened just next door. Only a few days after the sales ban was enacted to go into effect in neighboring Kitchener and Waterloo, we saw immediate consequences. An illicit market emerged. I'm sharing with you an article from the CBC where we saw an assault and a theft at a fireworks retailer. What I had warned council about was that criminal activity would be omnipresent and would be welcomed to the community with a ban in place. I did not realize it would happen this quickly, given that the ban is coming into effect in January. This is a clear warning sign, and I think Wilmot Council must ask itself, do we want the same? Or do we want to keep fireworks within a regulated system where vendors are licensed, local people are employed, users are educated at the point of sale through our own vendor certification employee training, and municipal bylaws are respected and reinforced. I did mention North Dumfries, and despite several staff recommendations, very similar to what's before you today, particularly around regionalization, council recently rejected a sales ban. You may ask why. I'd like to share some verbatims from council members from the recent meeting that I attended, and I quote, "It feels strange to ban sales. How do we ban sales and not use? Let's raise the fines and crack down on offenders. We must reject the sales ban and back off. Let us say no to a region-wide approach, and a ban won't stop bad actors." Council was right in their deliberations on this. These are responsible and reasonable comments and questions, and they're being asked by elected officials like yourselves, trying to make common sense decisions that balance community safety, fairness, and practicality. Even the Mayor of Kitchener, who I did speak with at FCM this weekend, talked about this, and he called it an overreach. This is an article from the Kitchener-Waterloo Record, and although they did move forward with a ban in Kitchener, you might have seen a recent op-ed in some pretty strong language by Mike Farwell from your local radio station, who called a ban, in his words, not mine, foolish. I think there was something to be said about that. Now, let's turn to solutions. We're not here to say do nothing. We're here to say that there is a better way. And I appreciate that this report is coming back in August. We'd love to be able to work with the municipality, with Aaron and staff, on a four-part proposal that enhances oversight, education, enforcement, and partnership with the industry. And I believe it could be easily amended into your bylaw. First is oversight and compliance. I talked about our vendor certification program, so only CNFA-approved vendors can display our certification seal. They would undergo annual compliance training and must abide by local sale dates and all the rules inherent. That really goes away if the industry is booted out of town. We also offer staff training, sales monitoring, and compliance toolkits where vendors get signage and checklists, and really ultimately putting education at the point of sale to help your bylaw enforcement. Again, boot us out of town and that really doesn't happen. The second premise I wanted to share was public education. We do run a Be a Good Neighbor campaign. I know the council asked about this earlier in terms of what can people do. They can follow the federal rules. I'm holding them in front of you, and we provide this at the point of sale, promoting responsible use and awareness, including of noise, of pets, and of vulnerable neighbors. Our materials are also multilingual, also helping your community. And the question around Lunar New Year, we do provide materials in Mandarin as well so that people really know the rules. Third is collaborative enforcement. To support your enforcement staff, we would propose more vendor accountability, more community reporting, and more data sharing, where we can provide real-time insights on sales patterns, helping municipalities like Wilmot better target enforcement. We are committed, if I can say in closing, to continuous improvement of our programs and our materials. We're committed to collaborating with staff to tailor our resources really to fit Wilmot and the needs of your community, and providing that ongoing education to support both the public and also supporting vendors. I understand the concerns around fireworks, but I want to be clear, an outright ban, as we've seen, does not eliminate risk. It just moves things underground. And you are going to open up an illegal market in your community and create more noise complaints and more concerns in the community because the bylaw, as staff said, will just not be enforced. Our proposal gives Wilmot a balanced, enforceable, and community-focused approach. It strengthens compliance, prioritizes safety, and avoids burdening enforcement teams. We are ready to work with the municipality. I really thank you for your time and attention. I'm happy to answer questions on how we can support Wilmot in building a safe and celebratory community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alim. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair to our delegation, you'd mentioned that there's distribution of material at the point of sale, particularly with the federal rules. I can say in my past experience I haven't seen that, but I think it's a good idea. I was curious, have you seen any municipalities or towns go so far as to also require that a copy or a summary of the local bylaw is distributed at the same time as the sale?
Through Madam Mayor, through the chair, to the councillor in the question, and it's an excellent one, because our belief is, and our stance is that those rules should be provided on the point of sale. I want to share something with you to your question. These are the federal guidelines around family fireworks and what should be done. I know you could probably dig through the Government of Canada's website, who regulate over 4,000 fireworks, to dig this out and find them and to figure out what the rules are. The challenge is that nobody looks at this when they purchase fireworks. So what have we done about that? Well, we've created our Be a Good Neighbor program. And again, I know I showed it to you before, but we provide this on the sale of fireworks to customers. We would be happy to do that in Wilmot, so that when people are purchasing, they do know the rules. They do know why Lunar New Year starts at the time that it does, and that we must follow the rules. They should know that fireworks, in most communities' cases, are not permitted in environmentally sensitive areas, near bodies of water, etc. They need to be told of the specific rules in the community that they will be using fireworks in. We can do that at the point of sale. And yes, to the question, we do that in many communities across the country where we do provide that information. Now, you know, Guelph has recently expanded their fireworks bylaw, and so we do have retailers there that, quite frankly, if there was a ban in place, I'm not sure we'd be committed to doing that if we're booted out of town. But I will tell you this, there will be people that go there to buy fireworks and come back and use them. We'd love to provide them with that information without being thrown out of town. I hope that answers your question.
I believe so, yes. Any other questions, councillors? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Aline, for joining us this evening. We really
Thank you, Madam
appreciate
Mayor.
it.
I'll stick around for the, I guess, the results of the item, or is this just being punted to August?
So tonight we will have our discussion. Council will decide if we want staff to bring back said proposed bylaw. So you'll have kind of a decision in that sense, but nothing would be made final until the council meeting in August.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Councillors, any other questions or comments on this topic? We'll go to Councillor Wilkinson first.
Thank you. Through the chair. So it's an interesting topic, and I think reading through the report and reading through the survey results, I don't necessarily agree entirely that the Wilmot results were reflective of the overall results in the region. I think the region took maybe a heavier stance, but Wilmot is very yes and no. It's almost 50-50 to a certain extent. And personally, I like fireworks. I don't have a problem with them. I think, you know, there's a time and a place, and this proposal sort of sets out bylaw enhancements. I don't necessarily agree with all of them. I concur with my colleague, Councillor Cressman here, that maybe some are useful, some are not. So personally, if we're having the discussion, I would agree that defining time of use would be helpful and helpful to the broader public. I would disagree with changing the amount of days that are available. I think providing sort of that before and after, in my opinion, is still totally reasonable, typically long weekends or holidays. So I'm okay with that. I would not be in favor of prohibiting the sale. However, I would be interested in potentially requiring that any fireworks sold in our township by a vendor also have to distribute a summary of our bylaw. Whether or not people choose to use them or review it, that's up to them, but I think if we provide the information, hopefully it'll be respected. And I am in favor of potential increasing fines for folks that contravene the rules here. And I'm maybe curious, is 500 enough, or do we think that potentially a larger fine would offer even more deterrence for breaking the set rules? Those are my thoughts, but I would just look for some and not all.
I just don't know if the question was directed at Aaron or at our council
Through
colleagues.
the chair, yes, there was a question, and yes, it was directed at Aaron.
Okay.
Do you think that, and I'll phrase it here, I agree that raising or increasing the fines will help deter rule breaking and enforce compliance, but I'm curious, do you think that the fine should potentially be higher? 500 seems insignificant in my opinion.
Thank you, through the mayor. As for fines, right now it's 150 to about 250, so I thought doubling it was 500. If it is the will of council, though, we can definitely increase that to say $1,000, and that's no problem at all.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I appreciate that. Do you find it effective when fines are higher?
I think fines are a wonderful deterrent, but like I had mentioned previously, it is very difficult to enforce. And that's not for a lack of effort, it's just the way it is. So yes, if we were to, lay a couple of those fines, word would get out there, maybe that would be helpful. But like I said, there is struggles and challenges around that.
Councillor Sadhu.
Thank you. Just some thoughts. When entering this meeting, I was in favor of increasing fines simply with the fact of if the fines are higher, that could be a deterrent of people who want to follow the rules. And if it is adopted, like Councillor Wilkinson is saying, at the sale of the fireworks, that we have a breakdown of our bylaw and the fines are set out in there, people might be more inclined to follow the rules per se. Recommendation number 2, truthfully, I thought the noise bylaw would be enough but I didn't think anyone would be setting off fireworks during the day. That seems like a waste of money in a firework. But if you're saying that it has happened in the past that setting a direct time would be beneficial. The prohibiting of the sale of fireworks kind of feels heavy-handed to me. I don't think, personally, I don't think we need to go down that road. And as far as the permitted days, Victoria Day, Canada Day, it does fall over a long weekend. So 12 days out of the entire calendar year that we could potentially have fireworks doesn't seem like a lot. So those are just my thoughts, that increasing the fines, also setting out times that they can be set off, and those would be the 2 recommendations that I would be in favor of.
Any other discussion at this point? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor. The comments I would make is, of course, maybe more animal related, and I think there are certain dogs, and over time, my son had a Yorkshire Terrier growing up, and we lost it when the fireworks were in New Dundee. And the debate was did one of the sons leave the door open, or was just the sound, bad enough that he could hear a mile and a half away that he hammered the door open, ran out on Huron Road, and was hit by a car on the way, the crowds on the way home. So it is a fact that some dogs are very sensitive to noise. I know the son who lost his Yorkshire Terrier also had he's grown up and he had another dog in Wellesley with him, and on thunderstorms it would be climbing the wall, and so I think there's a degree of sensitivity, and every dog is different. And then the one that I had some experience with, although it wasn't fireworks, I always was concerned about cattle getting spooked and breaking fences down. And it was more of a concern with hot air balloons going over top and then firing the propane burner. And it wasn't something that led up to it. So I think that's where my background about limiting time comes from, is I enjoy fireworks. Well, my grandkids enjoy fireworks, and it's something I think as a family you enjoy seeing. Yet I think putting constraints around that is a compromise for animal welfare that I think makes sense.
Councillor Martin, do you just want an opportunity to speak as everybody else has weighed in?
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. I don't really have much more to say, just what I was commenting on earlier, hearing complaints about people saying that there are persons setting off fireworks when they're not supposed to. But it's a dilemma. How do we enforce the bylaws? And being on the Canada Day Committee, we are planning fireworks again. I'm on that committee, and we certainly get a lot of people attending, in the thousands of people coming out, and they enjoy them. And at the same time, I know there are people in the community who don't want them. So it's that dilemma. Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. I did have one other question. In regards to the fines, if a fire ban were in place that fell on one of these days, would fines double up in any sense? Is there an additional fine if you're not only violating our bylaws of setting off fireworks when you can't, but if you're also doing it during the fire ban? That makes sense.
Thank you, Mayor. Wonderful question. So it is in our fireworks bylaw currently that you're not allowed to set fireworks off during a fire ban. So I believe it would be 2 charges that a resident would be able to get. One for setting them off during the ban. If it was a prescribed day, then it would be okay. They would just be charged with that. We could look at trying to double a fine, but I haven't seen it done.
That's fine. You did answer my question. I maybe didn't articulate it well enough. It was, is there, I guess inadvertently I was asking, is there a fine for if you use fireworks when there's a fire ban in place? So you answered that. Thank you. So councillors, I guess for way of moving forward, there seems to be some consensus, but not fully. So I would maybe ask that we go through each item, each recommendation, and vote on them separately. And then if there are additional things, like I know Councillor Wilkinson, you expressed the interest in our bylaws being presented at time of sale. After we go through the 4 proposed recommendations, then we can entertain if people would like to bring forward amendments in that capacity. So I would look, I guess, for the first recommendation, and I suppose that I would treat them, unless the clerk has other thoughts, as amendments perhaps. So we'll treat them as amendments, just so that the other language about the time of bringing back the bylaw and making appropriate adjustments stays the same. So for decrease number of permitted days, Councillor Martin.
Mayor Salonen, if we're doing amendments, if we vote against the amendment, does that mean that the recommendations would go through, like we would not go through because we haven't formally approved them, but they would be the ones coming back to our meeting in August.
So what I would be looking for, because this has been moved and seconded, is if anybody wants to make an amendment to change what is currently written. So if you want to see the decreased number of days permitted, then you're not going to be proposing an amendment. But if people don't want to see the decrease in days, then they would propose an amendment that we can vote on. So does somebody want to, based on our discussion, Councillor Wilkinson?
Yes, through the chair, I propose that we maintain the current bylaw regulation, so leave the set amount of days at 12.
Okay, so that's been moved by Councillor Wilkinson. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Discussion on the amendment as proposed. Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? And that's defeated. On to recommendation number 2, and that's add the permitted times to set off fireworks. Would anybody like to propose an amendment to these? Okay, seeing none. On to recommendation number 3, which is prohibiting the sale of fireworks. Would somebody like to make an amendment? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I would move that we remove this, or that, I guess, we prohibit the sale of fireworks, that it is okay.
It would be striking the item.
Can we strike the item?
Yes.
Yes.
Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Cressman. Any discussion on that? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Sallin, my discussion is simply if we're going to permit something, it makes sense that we allow our businesses to benefit from it.
I would agree. So I see no other discussion. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. So we have stricken the item of prohibiting sales, so they will be allowed should this all pass. And then the final is for the increased set fines. Does anybody have amendments? I know there was discussion of raising them. Councillor Martin?
I would amend that we increase the fine to $1,000.
That's moved by Councillor Martin. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Any discussions on this? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, just as a comment, I think in general it's meant as will allow the use of fireworks during the prescribed times. However, should you break the rules, expect a hefty fine.
Very good. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I'm in favor of increasing the fines, but I think there are people who, I know I've had some contact with certain people in Mannheim who've indicated they've got a neighbor who seems to use every excuse to set off fireworks, and the ash and the embers fall on his property and on his roofs, etc. And I'm not so sure there isn't people who, if people are setting them off illegally, that they wouldn't come forward. I think if it's being abused, I think it's the onus is on residents to come forward.
I agree. Any other comments or questions on this proposed amendment? All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And does anybody have any additional proposed amendments? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I would move that we incorporate into the bylaw some sort of instruction that if fireworks are sold within the Township of Wilmot, that they are required to provide a summary of the bylaw. Doesn't necessarily need to be a printout or a word for word, but at least a summary of the rules and regulations. Of course, that won't necessarily govern sales done outside of our township, but if they're being sold within, I expect that.
Could I perhaps propose the wording to be that staff bring back a recommendation on enforcing this when they bring back the bylaw?
That's agreeable.
Okay. So that's been moved by Councillor Wilkinson. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion on that item? Seeing none, all those in favor? That also carries unanimously. So any other items that anybody would like to amend to add on to this proposed motion?
Disappointed there was no fireworks.
If you want to see that, I'd suggest watching City of Kitchener's delegation evening on this topic. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I realize that this will be coming back in August with a more robust draft, but I think one thing that I'd be looking for as well is obviously building in some sort of a grace period. I know that, making changes like this, specifically if you've grown up in the region, unsure of what rules fall where, restricting, my understanding is, and it's sort of generally accepted, that it's the day before the holiday and the day after the holiday is within the reason. So I would hope that we build in some sort of a grace period within maybe the first year to allow anyone that maybe is not familiar or, isn't 100% of the rules is at least given that opportunity, or how you choose to maybe enforce that. But I don't know if my peers feel the same way, but just to allow gradual time for us to adopt this.
Aaron, are you comfortable taking that as direction? Or did you want that formally in motion?
No, all good. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, seeing no other conversation on this item, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to report 10.3, and this is property tax exemption for affordable housing program. I'm going to be honest, it's a pretty long one and everybody has it on their agenda, so I'm not going to read the recommendation. I am just going to ask for a mover and seconder to get this on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. And I will invite our Director of Corporate Services and CFO, Greg Clark, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this property tax exemption for affordable housing program was initially implemented by the region back in March of 2024. So they've set up the framework, which is attached as one of the attachments. It lays out the criteria that they go through in assessing whether an applicant meets those conditions that they've set out. And what they've asked is that the lower tier municipalities participate in the program as well, because their program can only exempt the regional and educational portions of property taxes at this time. So to date, the 3 cities have signed on and they participate fully. So if somebody gets an exemption through the region, then the cities reflect that in their property taxes as well. Woolwich has adopted it on an application basis. So as these get forwarded from the region, then council considers them one at a time and makes a decision on each one. What I'm proposing, or what staff is proposing here, is that we follow the model of the cities, and that if the region is exempting, then we will exempt as well, based on the region doing the evaluation and submitting it to our tax department and ensuring that they've met all the qualifications. So one of the attachments, I believe it's the second attachment, third attachment, lists the properties that have been approved and are in the process of being approved, and one of those does fall within the Township of Wilmot. That's, I just had the name here, Maple Heights. So they signed their agreement back on January 1st, and so once this bylaw was approved, if it was adopted as proposed, then they would be eligible for an exemption of their Wilmot Township taxes, effective the day of the approval. And then, as the mayor pointed out, it is a long recommendation in that part of it is to report back to council on an annual basis on the impact and the number of applications, the number of agreements, and the amount of property taxes being exempted under the program on an annual basis.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Director Clark? Councillor Cressman.
Yes, this is maybe, through you, Mayor, a side question, because I've had some contact with residents of Maple Heights, and some board members in Maple Heights, and I believe their mortgage was paid off, and they had some significant changes in their rent that they were being charged as a result of it. And as such, I don't have a clear understanding, because I'm getting differing views from different people regarding that. So I'm definitely in favor of this waiver of taxes, but I don't know where I go to get kind of the hard facts of subsidized housing in the in my own ward so I can better understand what they're communicating to me. So can anybody direct me on that, or that is a side conversation I should have?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, I think that's probably better addressed offline, that we could sit down, because I don't off the top of my head know who to point you to at the region, but it would be somebody at the region that we'll have to connect with.
That's sufficient. Councillor Sadhu?
Thank you. Just to piggyback off of that, that was one of my concerns, was what kind of safeguards would be in place that these savings would be passed on to the tenants. It would just take a landlord or the owner of the property to do some creative accounting and not pass that on to the renters. But to my question, for Director Okrafka, based on what we have currently in projected trends, how many of these type of units or additional units do we expect over the next 5-10 years or so?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Sadhu. I don't have an exact number, but the one that comes to mind is obviously the Link project, and whether it would meet the criteria, though, I don't know the answer to that, how many of those units would meet. But certainly the criteria are fairly standardized there, so it gives a target to those who want to seek lower taxes as part of reducing their overall cost. But I don't have the specific number, but I believe that project is 34, but some of them are rent geared to, they're not all, wouldn't meet the definition of affordable, so we haven't seen the exact numbers on that, but I'm thinking probably 10 to 20 units within that building might meet the definition of affordable. The goal on that project obviously is to have a blend of residents, some paying market rents and some paying less than market rents. Other projects would obviously come forward, though, I would expect over the next number of years.
Councillor Stu?
So essentially, I guess overall we can say it's not going to be like a high volume of units that we're expecting in Wilmot, so it's going to be a fairly low number.
Councillor Wilkinson, did you have your hand up?
Thank you. Through the chair. Reading through this policy, I mean, I don't want to, well, maybe it did present confusion. I understand where it's coming from and what they're trying to propose, but my confusion is how effective it will be and how it will be enforced and what potentially lays down the road. And a couple concerns we've heard already is how do you guarantee that the savings from not paying a property tax bill are necessarily 100% being passed on to the renters, and how do you even guarantee what is or what isn't necessarily affordable? I think there's a few different definitions, but it leaves too much open for debate, and I see potential cons, whereas that if there are folks that are in these situations, potentially losing access to the Trillium grant could actually hurt their wallet directly, and that may present a problem in itself, and I can't necessarily come to terms with that. But then at the same time, I think the biggest issue for me when looking at this is uncertain what the financial hit will be to this community in terms of just the tax base in general. If we open this box and allow for potential applications to come forward, it will increase the cost to the tax base that isn't exempt. And that is a concern I have given our current financial situation and what we expect our future financial situation to be. So for that reason alone, in some of the surrounding questions on it, I don't necessarily know that this is an effective policy. So one that I'm not super supportive of at this time. I think the spirit of it is well-intentioned and certainly could potentially have some benefits, but I think there are drawbacks and cons to the general tax base, as well as it could negatively affect the individuals that are hoping for relief out of this. So for that reason, I personally am opposed to this policy, but I am also curious. I have a question for Director Clark. If by chance you've done the calculation, if everything that was proposed or potentially coming down the pipeline were to be approved, what the financial impact might be to the Wilmot budget?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, has Agnesio Kafka stated, the Link one is still uncertain in terms of the number of units, the assessment, the taxation, so I can't really speculate on what that is. In terms of Maple Heights, their current tax bill is about $12,000 a year, so $1,000 a month, so that would be in the first year. It would negatively impact our revenues from taxes, so it wouldn't adjust the budget. In future years, because that assessment would come off of our rolls and would now be an exempt assessment, what it would do is it would, to your point, lower our assessment growth next year. So if we have assessment growth of $1 million in assessment, and this was $1 million in assessment that came off, we'd have zero assessment growth. So that assessment growth would in essence disappear for a year, and so the any tax increase next year would be more heavily felt by existing taxpayers. So quite honestly, when I read through the region's presentation of the financials, I was a little confused in that they said it didn't have an impact, but it does have an impact on existing taxpayers because somebody has to pay those expenses. I think one thing to also highlight, the concern about who gets the benefit. In existing situations, it is difficult to look at somebody who's come in and already exists. The purpose of this in a lot of situations is for new projects like Link going forward. So they're trying to make their pro forma work. So they're looking for situations where they can find reduced costs to get the projects going. And that's really what the intention of this is for new development, to get that average cost per unit down where they can meet the affordability targets. And those affordability numbers are set by CMHC, so they're very robust in terms of they're based on regional costs, they're based on regional assessment of average household income and those types of things. So it is not just the region assessing what's affordable. They're using CMHA statistics and data to establish that. And I think really the intention of this is to go forward on new projects to assist them in getting going. I know when I talked to Link, they were very excited that we were bringing this in June because they've gone to CMHC and asked for additional funding, and it's all part and parcel of putting that pro forma together to get to a point where they can actually offer these units because of the different funding mechanisms in place.
Councillor Wilkinson?
So through the chair, your point is taken about obviously geared towards more or new projects that are coming online. I guess I have a couple questions. So one, do we know how many units are at Maple Heights? I mean, 12,000, give or take. Again, I'm trying to balance this against or contrast this to potentially the individuals that, again, are receiving Trillium benefits. I see this as a drawback for them to potentially lose that income or supplementary income. But then item number two is looking at the agreement length. Are we potentially tied in and locked into this for 20 years, or potentially the length of the mortgages that these owners would potentially take out on these buildings? So are we potentially setting ourselves up for a long-term agreement that we can't get out of?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are 24 units currently at Maple Heights. In terms of the out clauses, I believe that the agreement is for 20 years, provided they meet all the continuing conditions. So it is giving them, and this is where I say it is geared towards new projects because it's creating that sustainable funding level that they require to meet those needs. So you know, the early uptake of existing units is going to be a little bit more nuanced. As to Councillor Cressman's point, you know, they may have paid off mortgages, they may be in a different funding situation, so that is a bit nuanced, but it is really to help those trying to get their projects that they know for 20 years they have a fixed agreement on their cost.
Councillor Cressman?
Yes, just for clarity on Maple Heights, it's a community-based volunteers that are on the board. The land was donated by the late owner of the property, which was a farm equipment dealership. The community raised money to build Maple Heights. Board of Trade was involved. And so I'd look at this, but as I understand, again, I might be limited, but I've been told that once the mortgage was paid, ownership reverts to the Region of Waterloo, and they control aspects of rent, etc. So I'm sensing that it seems Maple Heights keeps coming up in this discussion, and I'm looking at it and saying, do we need further information that we all have the correct facts before we can move forward on it and know the implications? Certainly, I don't know how I would vote on this. I think the community thought they were making a contribution to helping people who needed a place to live in their older age. And so I'd like to get more information before I would make a decision on this. So I move to defer. Question now is to when?
And that was about to be my question for you. When are you moving to defer that?
When it would be, who can provide, who could provide some guidance on this to me? Like 2 months down the road, or 6 weeks, or?
Can we get clarity on what information it is that you're looking for staff to collect for you, and then they might be able to provide a better timeline for deferral?
I guess what I'm trying to say is, who's controlling Maple Heights? Is the region giving or similar housing like this? Who, after the community steps back and the mortgage is paid, the information I'm receiving is the region steps in and sets all the rules. And it no longer, although there's a local board, they're dictated on a variety of items. And that's the information that I'm receiving. And again, I think some of the board members I've talked to don't have a clear picture themselves. And so it's kind of saying, we've got a local institution, it's assisting people, but we don't have a clear picture of what is in fact the rules around which it operates. And I think that's the piece that I think are important, because it likely will impact other such, Link and some of the others as we look, love your neighbor as we go forward, but I could be wrong.
Okay, I believe I understand what you're asking now. I suppose I would say what's actually before us right now is separate of Maple Grove. Maple Heights, thank you. The Maple Heights component was just a compilation of currently existing applications that would be impacted. So I get what you're saying, and I think that we can certainly ask of staff to bring back that information. I would perhaps look slightly differently at it though, and look at deciding if we want the policy to exist or not, and treat them as two different things, because personally I wouldn't want necessarily the governance structure of one facility to impact how we're deciding on a policy that will have impact presumably far beyond, if that makes sense. So I would maybe ask if we could direct staff to bring back that information on the governance piece that you're asking, but keep that separate from what we're discussing and voting.
That's good, thank you.
Okay, so staff, are you okay to report back on that to council with that information? Thank you. I think even via email would be sufficient once you have that sorted out, if that works. Great. We're going to go to Councillor Martin first.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Sallin. I'm in agreement with what you just said, and that's in line with what I was thinking about as well. I don't see Maple Heights as being the primary motivator here. It's about the policy. And in my mind, the policy is a good one. I would be happy to go with the region and the CMHA criteria of affordable housing. If there's debate here and trying to have a separate criteria from the region and CMHA, then I guess we could consider that. But in my opinion, I would be happy to move forward on this.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you. Through the chair. The reason Maple Heights maybe comes up is because it was mentioned as an example prior. But if there's 24 units at $12,000, we'll just say there's $500 per unit there that isn't being collected by the township. And the question, I suppose, is that $500 savings being passed on directly to the resident? And even if it was, I guess the question is to what extent? And, you know, do we potentially see rents rising down the road? I don't know. What I'm balancing this against is that in the report, it very clearly outlines that if you live and reside in a tax-exempt dwelling, you are not eligible for an Ontario Trillium grant. And I think it can range anywhere between $1,200 to $1,400. So if we're looking at a member or an individual who's living in a dwelling that is subsidized and already geared towards low rent, are they necessarily reaping the rewards, or is potentially putting $1,200 to $1,400 in their pocket better used? And that's where I struggle, in that if you potentially take that benefit away from someone, are we actually doing them a disservice? So I struggle balancing that, and I'm not sure what the data would suggest or what the answer is on that, but my guess would be that anytime you take money out of someone's pocket, it potentially can hurt them quite a bit in terms of their budget and how they spend money in the community or what they plan for. At the same time, I'm also very conscious of the fact that taking away any potential tax assessment will eventually just be passed on to the greater public. So I'm conscious of the fact that, yes, this is not a massive amount, but if this does end up becoming a regular application, we see 10, 15, 20 of these, what does that do to impact the residents that are paying taxes? So I think there's a few things at play here, and for those reasons alone, I'm opposed.
Any other questions, comments, or discussion on this evening? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote then. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that is carried. And on to report 10.4, and that is that report COR-2025-27, Transform WR 80x50 Strategy Update, be received for information. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Martin, and I will invite back up our Director of Corporate Services and CFO, Greg Clark, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this came from a notice of motion by Councillor Martin back in March to provide some feedback or report back on the township's commitment to follow the regional Transform Waterloo Region strategy, which sets a number of targets for greenhouse gas reduction over the next 20 to 30 years. As has been shared in the I think at our Committee of the Whole in May, the use of natural gas as a heating source has continued to rise in the township, and so I think that is what sparked part of this concern. When looking at the commitment that the township made previously, there's two functions within that commitment. There's the community function, which is the broad township, all residents, all businesses, and the commitment for the community to meet goals. Separately, there's also a commitment of the organization as a corporation to meet goals. One of those is within our control in terms of we can impact the things that we do in terms of our facilities, our fleet, the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis. In terms of the community, we have limited influence in how we can impact people's choices for heating source or choice of vehicle. Those types of things are not within our sphere of influence. We can support community initiatives, definitely. We have a role to play in that, and I think what staff have identified is that part of the struggle within achieving these goals is that the internal focus hasn't been properly resourced. So when we want to look at how do we reduce the impact of our facilities, we need to have funding and staffing and a program designed to looking at improving the air tightness of facilities, the heating, the cooling operations, the lighting, automation. Those types of things require time and investment. Same with fleet, electrification, opportunities for that, which actually in our world, a lot of our equipment is heavier than the general consumer, so electrification isn't necessarily as simple of an alternative when you're looking at a vehicle that may be driven 7 or 8 hours continuously a day in certain operations, driven in more harsh conditions, driven off-road, have higher demands, have higher risk of failure, impacting service delivery. So there's a number of things at play that we've achieved some of the low-hanging fruit, like changing of street lights, changing of internal to LED. We do have some electric vehicles within our fleet, but to achieve a corporate momentum on this would require investment and direction from council to embed it as part of the budget process. So the recommendation from staff is that and it's not really a recommendation of this report, but if council wants to see this as a corporate priority, then it needs to flow through the budget. So budget is where we can make that investment. We can give direction to Director Catania to look at opportunities for our facilities. We can, Director Mullenhouse, we can look at opportunities for fleet electrification. We can look at those things, but we need that direction through budget, and we need the staffing and resources to go along with that to manage that. And I know there has been a history around a sustainability coordinator. Not going to get into any of the details around that, but we don't have that position now. So that is also a resource that's not. So if that is something that council desires, I think budget is the place where that lands. In terms of the community investment, I think there's an opportunity for us to partner and to continue to advocate and to continue to make programs awareness available to new homeowners, new home people buying a new home, what their options are, how they can reduce their footprint, talking to businesses about different programs that the federal, provincial government might be offering for retrofit. But I think really ours is an advocacy within the community to support community members taking on that initiative with potential for council to offer incentivization if they wanted to look at some programs, but that's really outside the scope and might be further down the road.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, perhaps a question, but more so comments. I appreciate the feedback and the overview. I very much agree with that. It's very difficult for us to dictate or mandate within at least our mandate and what we can do to the community, how they should change and what can happen. I think perhaps something would be, when we look at the new official plan, there might be some things in there that could be related to development that may potentially help cut back on greenhouse gas emissions moving forward. But to your point, Director Clark, it's important that there likely is some sort of coordinator internally, sustainability coordinator, if you will, that could potentially spearhead these initiatives across departments. But again, point well taken that it requires budget and spend and other items. So I guess maybe something to take away is when we do I anticipate we'll probably be discussing this during budget, but are there potential positions internally that could be reallocated or re-resourced to become a sustainability coordinator? Is that something that, and I'm not asking for a direct answer now, but more as a thought process, so not a question, but something that, is there internally options that could be maybe a shared role or potentially one that is reallocated resource-wise to potentially facilitate a project or projects like this. But obviously going hand in hand with, is there budgetary resources in order to spend on some of these requirements? But that would be my thought. So hopefully we see this during the official plan process as well as budget process, and then eyes towards the future.
Councillor Cressman?
Yes, further through you, Mayor, to Director Clark, my takeaway from your comments was it takes dollars if we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint, dollars which we don't have. We can get a coordinator. Maybe the only lifeline would would be looking at potential grants that would apply in certain areas that would generate funds that would allow us to make some changes, incremental changes that would reduce our greenhouse gas footprint. I think my thinking, as I understand and looking at the data, my quick takeaway is transportation is our big one. You know, kind of as the big contributor to greenhouse gas, I think public transportation is something we have to look at. As you know, we've heard some promising things. What that looks at when the rubber hits the road in terms of Wilmot Township, I think is the real key. Is it going to assist our residents and reduce the reliance on cars? So I think there's moving pieces on this one, and I think to go cold turkey away from natural gas heating, I think why we've seen heat pumps to a degree is because there's been federal subsidies to have people consider heat pumps. So again, using our money to help us convert, and so it seems to be, you know, maybe I'm not looking long-term. I do have a solar 150 kilowatt solar collector on my pig barn, and I'm contributing some green energy, but I think as we look at this long-term, the certain components we have to transition, and the transition will likely happen incrementally as money is available.
Councillor Stu?
Thank you. Just some comments. Although I see it as well-intentioned, this report essentially did confirm my thinking of within this township, there's only so much the township can do to really move the needle. It would be more so provincial, federal funding to really incentivize folks to go more green. The only thing I could think of is in the future, things like, for example, the Zambonis, we had an option to go propane or electric. Possibly in the future, like if we're looking at fleet or anything that gives us an option that we do price out one or the other and kind of see the cost savings or how much more it would cost. I think if it's relatively close or within 5-10%, then that's a discussion we can have. But it ultimately does come down to the almighty dollar. And if it's going to cost 20, 30, 40% more to go electric, then we would need to see the long-term benefits of it, and if we can't afford to do the upfront cost.
Any other comments, councillors? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Salonen. Just to express appreciation for the report. I appreciate you taking the time to work on this. And it's true, practically speaking, we have to figure out from a budget standpoint where we're willing to spend our money. So I guess that's what we'll need to look at in the next budget. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. So this is just for information, and it has already been moved and seconded, so I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to item 10.5. And this is that report COR-2025-28 financial analysis from 2011 to present. Update be received for information. To again get this on the floor, may I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Martin. And I will invite our Director of Corporate Services and CFO Greg Clark to introduce this report as well, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this came from direction that Councillor Sadhu put forward back in December at, I believe, at our first budget meeting. And the intention is to look back to 2011 and try to identify some of the trends and some of the issues that have arisen over time, and a number of items were listed to look at. At the time, I cautioned that there's a lot of work involved in this, and so what you have in front of you is an update on a couple of the items, with others to come in September when we bring back the final, or bring back a pre-budget sort of update on the township's finances. And so things like tax increase, average tax increases, operating capital budget trends, actual operating capital expenditures, those are a little bit more nuanced, and so it's taking a bit more time to dig out that information. But we're working diligently on that. So the three things that I wanted to highlight today were, one is reserve funds, and this question came up during the budget. Where have our reserves gone? And so, as the graph shows, over a period of time to about 2016, our reserves grew, and that was all reserves, tax-funded, non-tax, and obligatory. And then over the last about decade, we've drawn down on those reserves to the point where our obligatory reserves are in a negative position. Our non-tax reserves for capital are actually fairly healthy relative to our other reserves, and our tax reserves are very minimal. This indicates a couple of things. So one thing that I did highlight in here is change in methodology in the way that we track our reserves. So historically, we had tracked our reserves with all commitments taken out. So it didn't really show us how much cash we had. It showed us how much we hadn't used for a budget, which is a difficult thing to analyze, because if you have large unspent capital, that means you could have a lot of money tied up in capital projects that aren't moving forward, they're not being spent. So, you have $40 or $50 million in capital projects plus only $10 million in reserves. It looks like low reserves, when in reality, a lot of that funding hasn't been used yet. So we made a change in 2023, or as of 2023, that we're reporting our reserves pre-commitments, so the actual balance is in it, and then showing the commitments. And what that does is it allows council to see how much cash we have and how much funds we have available to budget with, and then how much work we have in the pipeline. So when you see the budget, what you'll see is a reserve balance, or not the budget, see the year-end report, you'll see a reserve balance, and then you'll see a commitment number. So what this indicates, though, from the obligatory reserves, is that our development charges are overdrawn, and that is why we issued debt in 22 and 23. We've spent DC development charges to build infrastructure that's required for housing, and we've borrowed against that to fund that. So that makes total sense. Our amount of debt outstanding equals about the negative balance in those development charge reserves, so that would make sense. It's no different than a home. If you considered, you paid cash and then borrowed from the bank, you'd have one offsetting the other. So it makes total sense. The one exception being the building services reserve fund, which is negative, and we talked about at budget, and we're working towards fixing that. From a tax funded reserve, we do have fairly low, considering that tax makes up about 75% of our infrastructure obligations. So the fact that we don't have a lot in our tax reserves is concerning, and so that was also part of what was discussed at budget time, with the goal of moving that forward. In terms of how this situation came to be, it's a situation of keeping tax rates low, which meant we were funding capital in real time. So we were putting $2 million towards capital program and spending $2 million. We were putting $3 million towards capital, and we're spending $3 million. So we weren't putting any extra into our reserves, so that would make sense. And then as capital budgets grew, and we brought in asset management in about 2016, then we had to start spending more on capital, but we didn't make up the difference in the funding of that capital. So we start to draw down reserves, because we're actually implementing an asset management plan. We're actually following through on the projects that have been identified in that. And so that's where you see that drawdown in reserve funds, is because we've implemented an asset management plan without putting in place a funding strategy to offset that drawdown. It was started, I know that I believe the 2020 or 2021 budget did start talking about asset management funding and increasing funding. It's just the degree of funding wasn't sufficient to offset the expenditure. So it's not an unfixable situation by any means. The approach in direction that council provided this year through the budget is going to help rectify some of this, is we're going to see more funds flow into our capital reserves from tax as well as non-tax, and we're going to see those reserve balances start to return to a more healthy state. So in September, you'll see a forecast of where our reserves are expected to go in line with the new updated 10-year capital plan. So from a reserves perspective, yes, it's great to have 100 million in reserves. We don't, but we're working on improving that. The other issue that's come up that I've identified here is our year-end reporting. So as council knows, we prepare a budget based on a cash basis. So we can compare revenues to expenses in real time. We don't look at accounting standards which treat non-cash items as expenses as well. And the major non-cash item is depreciation. So starting with PSAB, which is the Public Sector Accounting Board standard 3150 in 2008, municipalities were required to account for depreciation on their financial statements, but not in their budget. So it's an excluded item when it comes to municipal budgeting, but we have to report on it on our financial statements. And what through the analysis I've gone through is that annually, we have averaged a $3.8 million deficit when you bring in depreciation. And that's really saying that we're not putting enough away to cover our depreciation. So if our depreciation's been averaging 6.6 million, then we should have been putting at least 6.6 million into reserves, and then we'd have a net zero. But we've been putting 3 million into reserves, and therefore we're running this deficit. When you see our statements, you'll see that our bottom line tends to not be that deficit, and that bottom line is because we account for other items related to cash finance or capital financing. So when we bring in development charges to pay for a major capital expenditure on a new sewer, we bring that cash in all at once, and we recognize that development charges revenue in the year we spend it, so $3 million, but we depreciate that pipe over 70 years. So in the year that we spend on major projects like development charge funded projects, CCBF funded projects, we recognize the revenue related to that capital expenditure in that year, but the expense carries on for the next 50, 60, 70 years. So we do get an influx of revenue, but it's capital financing revenue. It's not ongoing, sustainable infrastructure renewal revenue. It's related to current funding from other sources. So it's really, in essence, if you exclude the growth, because growth only pays for it the first time, it means we're not saving for the second time. It's also acknowledging certain government funding like CCBF and other grants, which some of them are sustainable, some of them are not. So some of the ICIP funding has been one time. It may not come around again. CCBF tends to be more consistent, but that's what causes that bottom line surplus deficit to fluctuate significantly. What I'm highlighting is the top line, where we're looking at our year-over-year expenses and revenues excluding that capital financing, and that's where we're having that ongoing deficit. The other piece to this is that our asset management plan needs an update. As I highlighted during budget, I feel like it's understated. I feel like we're not recognizing the level of investment that's required. So that depreciation of 6.6 million isn't being reflected in a proper or an accurate, I guess, more comprehensive way in terms of replacement value. So we could even be understating that loss, not on an accounting basis, but on a replacement basis. And so that's where my third concern comes in, is that without a really, really robust asset management plan, we can't take those financial statement numbers and turn them into a budget number of what do we actually need to budget for. Because depreciation is historical. Some of those pipes, that number's from 1942 when we put it in, not really relevant today. We need an asset management plan that says in 2026, what is the cost of that pipe? So that asset management plan needs to be, and we are working to meet requirements for July 1st, 2025 in the OREG, but then there's also additional work that needs to be done to make it more robust, to get it more comprehensive, complete, accurate, any word you want to use to describe it. There's areas where it needs to be expanded. It's a great starting point and a great core, but there's a lot of places where we can continue to improve and get better numbers out of it. So I'm open to any questions on the content I've shared today.
Thank you very much, Director Clark. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I think you answered most of mine, but this PSAB 3150, it was only in 2008 we started considering. That wasn't my stomach. That wasn't, it was only in 2008 we started considering depreciation, and depreciation is at cost, not at replacement value. And so as such, like you've said, it's understates where we're, what replacement is going to, cost us to get to move forward in some of these assets that are timing out. So, and then the obligatory, the blue lines that are dipped below, could you give us examples of those reserves, just so I understand clearly what those reserve funds are?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. So there's really three major categories that fall into that. There's our development charges are considered obligatory, and basically the act says you must have a reserve and you must pay interest, and it's not your income until you actually spend it. The second one is federal and provincial grants tend to fall in that if they're not a application-based grant, so things that like OCIF and CCBF. One is Ontario infrastructure funding, and the other one used to be called federal gas tax. I can never remember what CCBF stands for, but we also have to mandate in terms of the agreement, we put the money in the reserve and we only get to recognize it when we spend it. And then the third one is the building services reserve. So any surplus that building has is to go into a reserve that's held for future use. We have to pay interest, and it's kept separate, and it's not our revenue until we actually carry out services related to it. And so when they're in the negative in terms of development charges and building services, development charges make sense in the sense that if we built a $3 million sewer to bring online 1,000 homes, those 1,000 homes haven't paid their development charges because you can't put in a house until you have a sewer. So we build the sewer, we borrow for it, we charge them, and over a period of 10 years pay that off. So the reserve goes negative, we borrow against it, and as that payment comes in, they start to build that reserve back up. The building services is a bit different story. We should only really see a negative if we go into a 2 or 3 year down period where we have no housing starts, a significant recession, a significant decline in building activity. And even then, we should have been starting in a position where we have a surplus so that surplus actually offsets our operations over those 2 or 3 years, and then we build it back up. So the fact that it's in a negative is very concerning, as I shared at budget, and we need to make every effort to get it back to a positive, because it's intended to be a rainy day fund that operates as a target. Generally is 100% of current of 1 year's operating costs. So I believe, Howie, correct me if I'm wrong, buildings operations operating budget is around 400,000, give or take. Yeah, so we should have around 400,000 in that reserve, so that if we go into a rainy day, then we have $400,000 to keep the guys employed and keep things going until we get back out of that rainy day. So it is unfortunate, the situation that we're in with that one.
Just one follow-up through you, Mayor. What we used to call the gas tax, have we got these routine transfers from federal and provincial governments, have they been diminished over time in lieu of one-time grants that have more pizzazz and photo ops associated with them, or is that just my distorted view of it?
So through you, Madam Mayor, I wouldn't say they've been diminished. I would say federal gas tax, actually we've got, in the last 10 years, we got 2 years where they doubled it. Plus a bit of extras. They did some accounting and everybody got a little extra money because they had started to build up. And then the federal government has also made a commitment that as the amount of total tax collected increases, I think it's in $200 million increments, then they hand that out. So they increase so it is increasing. Provincially, OCIF, we're increasing as our asset, it's based on asset value, replacement value. So as that increases, we get increased funding. Where the application base has come in is the rate at which municipalities have identified the infrastructure gap and the need for funding, instead of the province or the feds, doubling funding and handing it out through those programs. They've increased the funding, but through application-based programs. And so, I would say that they have continued to increase the amount of funding available to us. It's just transitioned from, dedicated annual amounts that we can use for prescribed different activities to an application-based, which, adds time and complexity to our planning, because now we're not 100% sure of what our funding is going to look like, but there is funding out there, and they have not decreased the other programs. I do want to make that clear. They just really haven't increased them robustly in line with asset management demands.
Additional questions, councillors? Okay, not seeing any. Again, this is to be received for information this evening, so I will call the vote. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. On to report 10.6, and the recommendation is that report COR-2025-29 be received for information, and that council approve the in-year operating budget request for the Records and Information Management Coordinator position with an in-year budget impact of $10,000 for 2025. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. And I will invite our Director of Corporate Services and CFO, Director Clark, yet again to introduce this report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, a busy night for me. So I'm going to start with a brief introduction, then I'm going to allow Clerk Boss to really give you the flavor of the project or the program that's being asked for support here. So in line with a lot of activity going around the organization in terms of modernization and improving systems and improving our ability to deliver service, our ability to manage data and records is really critical to that. So there's a lot of instances where we can't find documents, we can't put our finger on them quickly. I think council can probably share some of their frustration with that. It's everything from ministry reporting to FOIs to even simple stuff across departments where we want to share information. And so it's not that nobody's doing it well, it's just not consistently being done well. So there are pockets of stuff being done well. There's pockets of stuff that has been digitized. There are lots of areas where we can find all the records, but it's not consistent. And so this program really aims to bring that consistency by applying it corporate-wide, by bringing both the software and the tools that allow us to manage documents, but also implement what's called TOMRIMS, which is really a categorization, which we could bore you with for days, but it has a whole bunch of categories that tells us how long to keep every document and why we're keeping it and who has to make the decision and all that. And so by implementing that, it really gives us the rigor to know that we've got the right documents in the right place for the right amount of time, and that they're easily accessible when the public or council or anybody else asks us to find those documents. So this program is really, that's the heart of it, and the ask here is really for the resources that in hindsight should have come with the ask that was put forward a few years ago for the funding for the capital piece, because this, like any other project, takes time and resources of a human nature to implement properly. So I'm going to turn it over to Clerk Boss to continue.
Thank you, Greg. So I'll just provide a brief overview of our Corporate Records Information Management Program, which is a structured program to manage the township's information assets throughout their life cycle, from creation to disposal for both electronic and physical records. It focuses on a systematic control, ensuring important information is effectively managed. We are compliant with regulations, we protect personal and private information, we improve the security of our data, and supports our operational needs. The township has recognized that information and records are a valuable corporate asset that support accurate, usable, and accessible information to support open, transparent, and accountable local government by improving our customer service and program delivery. The approval of a dedicated staff resource to this program is essential to ensuring legislative requirements and best practices are being met in the records and information management, archives, and access and privacy spaces. This program is a core function of the Legislative Services Division, who are completing multiple projects that are contributing to this improvement. So the projects that we are currently working on related to this include records management modernization, including the implementation of a physical and electronic records management software, and the data migration from our current corporate records repository to an electronic digital records management system through an in-depth solution design and development to best meet the needs of our township. Both projects are a significant undertaking and include a significant amount of staff time and resources to be available for the review, classification, and management of the township's physical and electronic records. We are making this request in year so that the individual may be able to join our team through the transition period and become the corporate expert to champion these initiatives moving forward. This position's involvement at the early stages of this project would also enable them to receive the training and information on the new systems directly from the procured software experts to enable them to better communicate and train other departments on the system as the data migration occurs. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you. Through the chair. I guess a comment and then a question. I do see this as a positive. I guess my question is from, say, a regular citizen's perspective or even a councilor's perspective, can we expect a level of service or accessibility to the records that if you could do, like, say, keyword high-level searches or, Boolean searches to be able to try and pull multiple records from archives or just that we make available online? Is that sort of the objective here?
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Through you, Mayor Salonen. This position would increase our level of service and openness and accessibility to documents. One of the first projects we'd work on is an active dissemination and routine disclosure, including potentially an online repository of records that our residents could access, including our bylaws and minutes. Also from a staff side, for FOIs and freedom of information requests, they would be able to be handled within the 30-day time limit and in a more timely, effective manner. Also ensuring that we are capturing the full amount of records that should be captured during that request. At this time, knowing what information we have there, where and in which form, can be difficult within our current system.
Any additional questions? Councillor Cressman?
If I remember correctly, my memory fails me from time to time, through you, Mayor, I think we did spend on software in this area, but there's no sense in spending on software if we don't have the staff to do the conversion of data. So didn't we get somebody from the company we bought this from to kind of help us through that transition, or is this the training piece that we'd be hiring somebody to get trained on?
Thank you, Councillor Cressman. Through you, Mayor Salonen. It is a contracted service, so there is training and onboarding to the program itself, but as for a staffing resource to put our information in and catalog our information, that was not allocated.
Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I apologize for something that might be obvious. I got lost. I see the $10,000 and the potential for $20,000 next year, but then the advertisement, well, not advertisement, but the position for a full-time position. So I was just trying to understand where the rest of that money, where does that get allocated, or where is that in terms of the budget?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to the councillor. We have a current FTE within legislative services that's vacant, and so the budget amounts you see there are the incremental difference between that position and the position that we're asking for.
Any addition, Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, potentially off topic, but related. I'm curious, would this individual also have oversight of, say, archival records or potential, when digging through items, say you find an old overview map or a development map, something that would have archival value or historical value, would this person also be in charge of sort of disseminating what is worth and not worth keeping? Or, yeah.
Through you, Mayor Salonen. Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Part of our corporate records information management program, there is an element that is an archives policy. Currently, we don't have anything in policy form that would dictate that. We do have a lot of information that could be subject to archival value and valuable for our future. That would be part of this position, would be to get that policy in place and to assume that responsibility.
Any additional questions right now, councillors? I do have a few, I guess not questions, but comments of my own. I do definitely see value in the position and the initiative. I guess my concern is an in-year budget approval, as well as it comes with essentially a pre-approval for the 2026 budget. I know that it says in the financial considerations that it would be included for budget approval, but if an individual is in the role, I don't see that we can suddenly not make that budget change for 2026. So personally, I would like to see this deferred to the budget process so that it can be considered in the greater context of the 2026 budget on a whole. I don't know if there's a councillor willing to move that. If not, I will opt out of chair and have somebody else chair so I can bring that deferral forward. But Director Clark, you had a technical question to add to that or answer?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I was just going to say, if that were to go, I would like staff an opportunity to highlight the risk with that.
Okay, you can highlight that. Yeah, bit unorthodox, but yes.
Well, I think it is important for council to understand that without this role, this project would be paused, and with the election coming next year, it would be paused until 2027. So this work is important, and I do understand that it should have come through the budget probably 2-3 years ago when we got the funding approved. It really has come to light as we've met with the developer who's helping us develop the solution and implement the solution, the level of work that's required within the organization. And so I just wanted to highlight for council that a pause until budget approval would in effect pause this work until post-election when we would have capacity if the role was approved to continue the work.
Thank you for that, Director Clark. I would struggle with that as if council chooses to put those resources forward in the budget. It is in budget that we set service level and direction on where staff are exercising their needs. So I can understand your point that it is ramping up into budget season. But again, I really struggle with in-year budget approvals, but I don't know if anyone's willing to move that. If not, I will step down and chair. Councillor Cressman.
Just one question. I don't know if it's a point of order or whatever. We talked to consultants today who are, as I understand, tasked with a people plan. And would this not be something that would be part of that? And so are we getting the cart before the horse on this? But I realize it's in your purview as strong mayor powers. As council, we are observers rather than participants. So I'm just trying to figure this one out on this side of the council chair.
I guess I just want to understand when you say cart before the horse, I would agree. So yes, the consultants that you're referring, that is part of the work that will be coming back will include more or less a people plan, that those terms of reference are still being hashed out fully on that particular component of their consulting. So I would see that as fitting in. So I guess just where I'm wondering is the Strong Mayors, are you just referring because Strong Mayors presents the budget? Or I guess in my mind right now with what you're saying, I'm seeing that both aligning with being with budget time. So I just want clarity on that.
Well, I guess organizational structure, according to Strong Mayors, is under your purview, not the rest of council's purview. So I'm hearing you're asking for council's yay or nay on something that at the end of the day, we don't have a yay or nay on, as I understand. That's where I'm going.
Okay. Sorry, I understand. I wasn't saying from the org structure component. So I mean, bigger context on this coming forward, although staff still haven't had a chance to present what would, I guess, their report be on the council resolution that Councillor Wilkinson had introduced about vacancies and changing of service levels. That hasn't yet come back to council, but this was in the spirit of knowing that council had passed that, so bringing it forward. In terms of the org structure and review, I do see this fitting into that, but again, I'm still looking for consensus building. So would like council to have opportunities to deliberate and have input, if that provides clarity. I guess my ask, yeah, like I said, is just that this be dealt with at budget time so that we have the bigger picture, because it does concern me a bit with the, both with, as you mentioned, the ongoing review right now of the work of the consultants, as well as that this would have larger budget impacts for 2026. So, does that answer your question, Councillor?
It does. I'm interested in what the rest of my colleagues are thinking on this.
All right. I don't know if you're looking to speak, Councillor Wilkinson, or... Okay. Councillor Sadhu?
I don't know if it's out of curiosity or if we were to go ahead with this position, how quickly would they be getting started? Is this something that would be a quick turnaround, or would it still be months away kind of thing?
Thank you, Councillor Sadhu, through you, Mayor Salonen. If it was approved by council in the council meeting at the end of June, we'd be hoping to have someone in by September, and we'd have September until the end of the year to onboard them and get them going with this project before Morgan and I transfer our main focus come January 1st to the municipal election. So they would be able to continue to guide this project through into the new year while we're focusing our attentions on the 2026 election.
I guess just another general comment. I am tending to lean more towards what the mayor is suggesting of deferring with having, I almost feel like, interim changes in between budgets. I would like to have more of a clear picture during budget season, and also with the said people plan still happening. I do kind of get the feeling it could be cart before the horse, so that's just where my feeling is at right now. I'm not sure what the rest of council is thinking.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you. Through the chair, I think the variable here that has potentially influenced or swayed me is, truthfully, as mentioned, there's a new people plan underway, or a new task being undertaken that may potentially change structure or may reallocate resources. So at this time rethinking it, I think I'm more inclined to agree that potentially we are putting the cart before the horse. And I mean, I hate to rob the clerk's department of a resource that could be very valuable, but again, recognizing that this is very likely a long-term project, perhaps we can press pause for now. So I'm curious to maybe hear everyone's closing thoughts.
Go to Councillor Martin first.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, just to give my comments, I would be ready to proceed with this position. It's been sitting vacant, which means that we've actually benefited from not paying out the money in the first part of the year. And so I wouldn't see it offsetting the budget by a significant amount. So that would be my...
Councillor Cressman?
Just through you, Mayor, further clarity. Does our contract run out with the people that we bought the software with? Does the clock ticking on that so that the potential to onboard somebody would run out?
Thank you, Councillor Cressman. Through you, Mayor Salonen. In full transparency, that contract was signed before I was in this position. I would have to review in further details the statement of work. I will say the contract was signed in 2023, and we also we already delayed it a year to getting it started, and I know they were pressing us to get going on the project, so we have put a month and a half to 2 months of work into the project already. But again, I would have to review that contract before I would know if we were on the hook for anything, or if it is something that we could press pause on until following the election.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Stu?
I guess my question would be, could we get that information prior to our next council meeting? As far as the contract goes?
Thank you, Councillor Sadhu. Through Mayor Salonen, I could provide further information at the June council meeting if that is the desire of council.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Yeah, a point of procedure then, in order for that information to be returned to council, the motion this evening would have to be referred to council, correct?
So there's a few ways we could go about it. So we could defer a decision pending that information coming back, which we could set the time and date of that being the next council meeting. We could, in theory, pass this requesting that additional information, and then it's again presented before council, the next council meeting. Those would probably be the two easiest ways forward, I would see, to achieve that outcome, if that's what you're looking for. So with that information, does somebody want to suggest a way forward? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor. I look at this as saying if we're just going to defer it and then turn it down at the next council meeting, it doesn't, it doesn't really move it forward. So I see this as, I see what my request would be is to get information if the clock is ticking on this contract and we're going to have spent money that's going to be poorly spent because we don't have the opportunity to onboard someone. I think that's critical, and that would lead me to this, to the conclusion that we have to move forward with this, if that is in fact the status. So does that mean I refer or I defer? I guess I'm looking to the clerk.
It would be defer, I believe.
Okay. So as such, then I would.
Okay, so the clerk is saying to refer back to staff for more information.
Okay, I would then therefore have a motion to refer back to staff for further information for the end of June meeting.
Okay, so that's been put on the floor by Councillor Cressman. Are you seconding that, Councillor? No, okay. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. So now it will be discussion on time and place. So that is to receive additional information on this at the end of June meeting. Okay, seeing none. So all those in favor, all those opposed, and that is carried. On to item 10.7, and that is the community grants program, approval of the 2025 grants. So the recommendation is that this report be received and that council approve the proposed 2025 community grant program listed in Appendix A for payment, save and accept for Group 15 of the New Hamburg Firebirds, as we will deal with that separately due to Councillor Martin's conflict. So right now we are looking at the entire list in Appendix A apart from number 15. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. And I will invite our Director of Community Services, Chris Catania, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report makes recommendations to Council for the award of the community grants under the 2025 Community Grants Program. The criteria for the program included revised policy for community grants, which was approved in 2024, and Community Services is now responsible due to the strategic position working with many of the applicants, supporting their efforts in delivering of services, events, and programs within the township. The goal of the Community Grants Program is to help support not-for-profit organizations in capacity building for the delivery of high-quality, inclusive, and well-organized programs. With this in mind, the township's goal is to balance the needs for not-for-profit organizations with good governance principles of affordability, accountability, accessibility, and transparency. The township received 21 community grant applications totaling just over $107,000. However, the approved budget for the 2025 program is about $55,000. Staff have provided a balanced recommendation for the funding based on the established criteria and setting out $52,000 for approval. Staff have provided a buffer of $3,000 to allow for minor refinements of council's direction. Happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you very much, Director. Councillors, are there questions for Director Catania? Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I would commend Director Catania for the work that was put in on this. I see it reasonable, and it met certainly my expectations, and so I would like to see this move forward.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I echo the comments of Councillor Cressman. However, I have one thought for the group, is that if we have budgeted 55, perhaps we can look at the extra 3,000. And I mean, I have a particular project I'd love to see it dedicated to. I don't know if there's any agreement to potentially reallocate the 3,000 that wasn't allocated at all. But if anyone is interested, I mean, I would look to the LINK project or Love Your Neighbor communities and potentially see us allocating that extra 3,000 there to their ask. I don't know if anybody's potentially in agreement with me there, but otherwise I'm quite satisfied with the way it looks.
Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Sallin, I concur or further support Councillor Wilkinson's proposal. I'd be happy to increase the amount of the Love Your Neighbor community.
Any additional questions or comments? I do have one question, and then we will go to that. I would take that as an amendment. The one question I had was number 18, the Waterloo Region Community Garden Network. In the Appendix A, it did not describe what they were planning on using their funds for. Did you have any more details on that, Director Catania?
Through you, Mayor Sallin, just taking a look here, a couple of the notes. We didn't have a proper justification, which is why you probably noticed the amount being what it was. It is basically, it serves the region as a whole, but did not specify a requirement for the funds, and they also do charge rent for their plots. So that's the justification for the funding of what's been allocated through the criteria in our staff evaluation.
Thank you. So in my search, they do have a Petersburg location. I guess I'm just wondering, is it possible, and maybe as direction, that the stipulation is the funds be spent for that particular site, as I know they have many gardens across the whole region. I have no issue with the $1,000 proposed funding. It's just I'd like it to be used in Wilmot if possible. I don't know if other councillors have thoughts on that, just without them proposing why they wanted the funding. Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah, through the chair, that's a great point, and one I was actually going to bring up myself as well. I think they have a couple gardens in our township, but I am inclined to agree that if we are going to offer grant funds, that they should be spent within Wilmot. And I know they have the Petersburg, and I think they have, there's one in, I want to say New Hamburg as well. I'm just drawing a blank as to where it is exactly, but yeah, there's a couple community gardens available. Yeah.
Director Catania.
Through you, Mayor Salin, to yourself and Councillor Wilkinson, this would be a point that we would be speaking to our applicants that if they meet the criteria, it has to be spent within Wilmot. It has to service the, and really benefit for the most part to the residents of Wilmot.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments then, councillors? Seeing none, Councillor Wilkinson, did you want to bring forward your amendment? But I don't know if Councillor Cressman has a question.
I missed where the extra $3,000 was going.
That's what I was just asking, if Councillor Wilkinson wanted to bring forward his amendment formally.
So through the chair, I would propose an amendment. I understand that we allocated budget up to $55,000 as a cap. Given that we've allocated $52,000, I would propose, or at least make the proposal, that we allocate the outstanding $3,000 to the Love Your Neighbor community, so the LINK project. I know they had a big ask, and it's part of getting their project off the ground, so I would see that as being positive support for that.
Sorry, Councillor Martin, did you want to second that?
I would. Can I also ask a question? Am I messing with my pecuniary interest? Because if I put forward a proposal, it means that the Firebirds wouldn't be accessible to any more money. Inadvertently, am I affecting my, so?
I mean, we can't formally advise on that, I guess is the proper term. However, I would say they're being dealt with in two separate contexts.
Okay.
Okay. So that's moved and seconded. I think that there's going to be a unanimous consent, but any other comments or questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, and that does carry unanimously. So now we're voting on the amendment as proposed, which is to go ahead with Appendix A as presented, excluding number 15, which is the Firebirds, and to reallocate the additional $3,000 to Love Your Neighborhood Communities. Councillor Cressman, where?
You've got it moved and seconded.
Yes, it is moved and seconded. Mainly just summarizing so that everybody following along, myself included, knows exactly what we're voting on. So I will call the question. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And now we will deal with item number 15, and that is, the recommendation is that council approve the proposed 2025 community grant program listed in Appendix A for payment for group number 15, the New Hamburg Firebirds. May I have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. And any comments or questions on this one, councillors? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to 10.8, and this is regional road assumption. Before we do dive into that, we are going to quickly take a 10-minute recess, and then we will re-resume. So we'll be re-resuming at 8:35. So everybody can go have a quick bio break or whatever is needed. I do think I technically need a mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That carries unanimously, and we will be back at 8:25. I'd be looking for a motion to reconvene into open committee of the whole, moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. So we are on to report 10.8, and this is Regional Road Assumption of Oxford Road 5. The recommendation is before us. I will look for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Stu, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson, and I will invite our Director of Infrastructure Services, Jeff Molyneux, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Mayor. This report seeks authorization for the Mayor and Clerk to execute transfer documents related to the transfer of Oxford Road 5, or our boundary share of Oxford Road 5, to the region of Waterloo. Council may recall that from previous reports provided to Council as a result of the Punky Doodles Corner reconstruction, with some of the capital negotiations and cost sharing that had occurred there was direction given to staff to proceed with the upload process for the remainder of Oxford Road 5 and our boundary share of that. And so this report is seeking that authorization so that Mayor and Clerk can sign the transfer documents. There are two transfers that have to take place. The first transfer is for a portion of the road that is currently entirely within Oxford's legal boundary, we'll say, to be transferred to the township. And then for that transfer to take place, following that execution, then the remainder of the full transfer would occur to the region of Waterloo. It is noteworthy that this being a boundary road, regardless of the share of actual legal ownership in terms of the right-of-way, we do share the boundary, and it is part of our jurisdiction. So it's important to note that regardless of the legal plan that shows ownership entirely within Oxford for a portion, that we still are party to that as a boundary. Happy to answer any questions should Council have any.
Thank you very much, Director. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Director Molyneux. Is that just an oversight of history, or was that how boundary roads at one time were handled, that it was like line fences, half of it was your responsibility and the other half was the other farmer's responsibility? I'm just interested in finding that we didn't have ownership of a boundary, part ownership of a boundary.
Through you, Mayor. So a couple of things. In terms of boundary rights of way, every boundary is different. We have some on our eastern borders that we own a majority, 95% of the right of way, and our boundary partner owns only a foot of the land within that right of way. There are other boundary roads that are shared right down the middle, and sometimes it's just a matter of how the land gets divided up at the time of. I would say in terms of this particular right-of-way for Oxford Road 5, this originally was a region of Waterloo right-of-way that was transferred to the township in the early to mid-2000s as part of a road rationalization process that the region undertook. At that time, this road was, I believe, a gravel road, and so it wasn't deemed to have regional significance in terms of the road network. Obviously, over time, that has changed with hard surfacing and certainly with what Oxford sees in terms of their transportation master planning and how they want to see that particular road grow. So that being said, in terms of our shared boundary with an upper tier, that's an odd situation, but that's one we're trying to rectify through this process. The actual land itself, though, is probably something that just had occurred long ago when lands were divided, but that does not, we'll say, relieve us of a boundary share of that road.
Any additional questions or comments, councillors? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. On to our announcements for this evening. June is recognized as Pride Month, and on Friday we did raise the Pride flag at the Township of Wilmot. So to all of the LGBTQIA+ community and those celebrating, happy Pride. We also acknowledge that June is National Indigenous History Month, and it's a time to honor the history, heritage, and diversity of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples in our municipality and across Canada. And I encourage all residents to take time this month to engage with Indigenous-led events and educational resources, which there are various ones across the region happening. This week is also Crossing Guard Appreciation Week, and we currently have 9 dedicated guards who work in all weather conditions across the entire township, making sure that our children and families make it safely to and from school. So thank you very much for all the work that you do. June is also Recreation and Parks Month, and we are celebrating the importance of active living and outdoor spaces all month long. Be sure to check out the township's recreation and events calendar for free and low-cost programming like pickleball, aquafit, and more. And to celebrate this month, the township is launching a Try It programs where community members can try different activities throughout the township at a reduced price. Also want to give a shout out for Canada Day volunteers. The township is still looking for volunteers for our Canada Day event. Sign up for volunteering ends this Friday. You can sign up on the township website or contact Manny Okrafka for more details. And what now seems like many hours ago, when Brett had mentioned, but Citizen of the Year nominations do open on June 9th, and you can either come into the township office to pick up a paper nomination form, or you can visit our website. Councillors, do any of you have announcements? Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen. So as you mentioned, Canada Day, and thank you for requesting volunteers. We don't have many community groups this year. Last year we had a number of community groups, and so there still would be time if some community groups would like to set up a booth and tell you've got access to a great community on Canada Day. Tell us about who you are, or advertise more of what you do. So,
very good. Any other announcements? One more that I do actually want to make is just congratulations to everybody involved in the Mennonite Relief Sale that happened this past weekend. I don't have the final number on what was raised, but I know I popped down on Friday before the event started, and the quilts were beautiful, and the food, I mean, the T-ball line I couldn't even get into because it was already so large. So I believe it was a really great event. So congratulations to everybody involved in that effort. Seeing no other announcements, I would look for somebody to adjourn this meeting, and then we will move on to our special council meeting. If there's a mover to adjourn, moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And it will just take about 10 minutes to get our technology switched over to jump into our special council meeting.